Hello everyone, welcome to History and Culture. According to historical records, in 1780, Emperor Qianlong of the Qing Dynasty celebrated his 70th birthday. The Minister of Works, Peng Yuanduan, presented him with a poem titled 9 Congratulations for Reaching the Age of 70, praising Qianlong's civil and military achievements. Qianlong was greatly pleased and personally wrote a response titled, On Reaching 70. In which he humorously belittled the 6 elderly emperors from the Xia, Shang, Zhou, Ming, and Qing dynasties, while reflecting on his own remarkable accomplishments. He proudly declared that he had already eliminated all possible threats to the Qing Empire. These threats included powerful vassals, ministers, court eunuchs, palace factions, and corrupt officials. However, from the perspective of later Qing history, despite Qianlong's declaration that these dangers had been eradicated, the power of vassals, ministers, palace factions, and corrupt officials gradually resurged to varying degrees. For example, in the late Qing period, Yuan Shikai's power became so great that it was difficult to control. While Empress Dowager Cixi took charge of the government through the practice of regency. However, the political influence of the imperial family, outer relatives, and eunuchs never returned. In fact, throughout the Qing dynasty, the political power of the imperial family and eunuchs never became a formidable force, which contrasted sharply with other dynasties where imperial relatives and eunuchs wielded great power and influence. The imperial family and eunuchs in the Qing dynasty remained low profile and had limited power in the palace. This was due to effective measures taken by Qing rulers at various levels, such as in ideology, systems, and laws, that strictly prevented the expansion and political interference of the imperial family and eunuchs. According to some historians, as early as the period of Nurhaci, the Jurchens, later the Manchu, had eunuchs in the palace. But they had not yet formed an organized system. It was not until the Qing dynasty entered Beijing and took over the eunuch system left by the Ming dynasty that eunuchs truly began to form a scale and structure. In the second year of Emperor Shunzhi's reign, 1645, eunuchs followed the Ming dynasty's tradition and bowed before civil and military ministers during court meetings to demonstrate their status. This greatly displeased the regent, Dorgan, who issued an order, from now on, eunuchs are not allowed to participate in court meetings and shall no longer attend or serve in the meetings. This effectively stripped eunuchs of their right to participate in state affairs. As the internal affairs of the palace became increasingly complex, Emperor Shunzhi established the eunuch yamen, the 13 yamen, in the 10th year of his reign, 1653. The heads of these yamen were all eunuchs, and they held very high positions and power. For example, the chief eunuch in charge of the Palace of Heavenly Purity, Jiaqing, was titled Chief Controller of the Court, equivalent in status to a Grand Secretary in the 3 departments. Other eunuchs in charge of various yamen were titled Department Head, comparable in rank to ministers and deputy ministers. To prevent the eunuchs from accumulating too much power, Emperor Shunzhi issued a decree that stated, no palace staff may leave the imperial city without authorization. They are strictly forbidden from interfering in matters beyond their duties, recruiting outsiders, or colluding with officials. They are not allowed to purchase land or property under their relatives' names, nor use such means to control local governments or harm the people. These regulations strictly limited the activities, social interactions, and personal wealth of the eunuchs, aiming to curb their power and influence. Although the emperor had expressed his determination to suppress the power of the eunuchs, some of them still failed to show restraint. In the winter of the 11th year of the Shunzhi emperor's reign, a grand banquet was held. Eunuchs from the 13 imperial mansions rushed to the palace to pay their respects, even surpassing the order of the princes. Meng Jinlu, the steward of the Qianqing palace, went so far as to refer to himself as an old minister in front of the Shunzhi emperor. This led the official Hao Jia to immediately object. citing examples from history of eunuchs meddling in politics. The Shunzhi emperor quickly issued an imperial order, at the imperial court ceremony. Eunuchs are not to be included in the ceremonial ranks. At the same time, Meng Jinlu and other eunuchs were handed over to the Ministry of Justice for punishment. And the power of the eunuchs suffered a major blow. The following year, the Shunzhi emperor ordered the casting of iron plaques to sternly warn the eunuchs: if any eunuch intervenes in state affairs, seizes power for personal gain, takes bribes, conspires with officials, or handles foreign affairs without authorization, or even petitions to degrade officials, they must be severely punished and immediately executed by slow slicing. This strict decree meant that any corrupt behavior by eunuchs would not be tolerated. Despite Shunzhi's efforts to limit the eunuchs' power, the officials remained apprehensive. After Shunzhi's death, the Manchu nobles, led by Oboi, immediately abolished the 13 imperial mansions and established the imperial household department to manage palace affairs, thereby consolidating the eunuchs' power under their own control. Subsequent Qing emperors continued and strengthened the policies of the Shunzhi emperor, further suppressing the eunuchs' influence. Emperor Kangxi repeatedly emphasized, eunuchs' crimes cannot be pardoned. They must not have authority, and must be killed immediately if they step out of line. Emperor Yongzheng went further, stipulating that eunuchs' official ranks should not exceed the 4th grade. Emperor Qianlong clearly stated, according to our imperial laws, eunuchs are merely palace servants and must not interfere in state affairs, especially not engage with officials from the outer court. Later emperors, such as Jiaqing and Daoguang, posted the iron plaques cast by Shunzhi throughout the palace to remind people to guard against eunuchs meddling in politics, and insisted on constant vigilance. Because the Qing emperors consistently maintained vigilance and actively implemented measures to restrict and punish the eunuchs' power, the Qing dynasty formed a long-standing policy of suppressing the eunuchs. The eunuchs were never able to gain the emperor's full trust and were consistently excluded from the centers of power. As a result, the eunuchs' influence never developed into a powerful political faction. However, the key to suppressing the eunuchs' power was not merely maintaining ideological vigilance, but also transforming this mindset into an institutional framework and putting it into action. In the early Ming dynasty, Zhu Yuanzhang was highly cautious about eunuchs interfering in politics and even set up an iron plaque in the palace reading, "Inner officials must not interfere in state affairs, offenders shall be executed." However, the chief eunuch Wang Zhen simply threw the plaque away. This shows that simple warnings and harsh words were ineffective as deterrents. To fundamentally resolve the issue, it was necessary to rely on systems to establish long-term checks on the eunuchs. In the 16th year of the Kangxi Emperor's reign, 1677, in order to manage the eunuchs effectively, Kangxi established a specialized institution called the Jingshifang, Palace Affairs Office. The Jingshifang was composed entirely of eunuchs and was under the jurisdiction of the Imperial Household Department, responsible for communicating all palace affairs from the emperor. In addition, several important departments in the palace, such as the Yi Ceremonial Office, Jingshan, and Shiyuan, were staffed by eunuchs to handle various matters. To prevent the eunuchs from gaining too much power, Kangxi also regulated the ranks and positions of the eunuch leaders. For example, the head eunuch of the Jingshifang held a 5th grade rank, and other eunuchs had strict grade regulations as well. Kangxi particularly emphasized, palace affairs cannot be managed without eunuchs. But how could I ever give them political power? This meant that eunuchs' role was strictly auxiliary, and they were not allowed to wield actual political authority. Compared to the previous system of the 13 yamen under the Ming dynasty, the Jingshifang, Office of the Imperial Attendants, established by Emperor Kangxi was not only smaller in both status and scale, but its powers were also significantly limited. During the reign of Emperor Yongzheng, although the ranks of the eunuchs were raised, strict control over them was still maintained. Emperor Qianlong, in particular, became more aware of the rapid expansion of eunuch influence. As a result, he ordered the compilation of regulations concerning eunuch management, which resulted in the creation of the Guoqiao Guanshi, official history of the national dynasty. This book detailed the duties, quotas, and responsibilities of eunuchs. In the Qianlong period, important departments within the palace had dedicated eunuch staff. For example, there were 24 eunuchs in charge of managing the emperor's historical records and sacred teachings at the Qianqing Palace, and 12 eunuchs responsible for opening and closing the palace gates and checking the ministers entering and leaving the palace. The roles of various eunuchs were clearly defined, and they were strictly confined to serving within the palace, mainly handling trivial tasks such as serving tea, cleaning the palace, and other menial duties. The fundamental purpose of these regulations was to prevent eunuchs from interfering in politics and to ensure that their role was solely to assist the emperor, without any involvement in state affairs. To further control eunuchs, the Qing Dynasty established the Imperial Household Department, Naiwafu, a special agency tasked with managing palace affairs. The Naiwafu strictly monitored the movement of eunuchs, ensuring they had no contact with the outside world. It was also responsible for overseeing all internal palace matters, no matter how trivial. Eunuchs were limited to service work, and their power was greatly reduced. The Naiwafu imposed strict control over eunuchs' wages, punishments for misconduct, and even their daily behavior. For example, during the Qianlong period, a eunuch who was found calling a minister by name behind his back was severely punished by the Naiwafu, receiving dozens of lashes, and was ordered to apologize to the minister. Additionally, the number of eunuchs in the Qing court was also strictly controlled. In the 16th year of the Qianlong reign, 1751, the total number of eunuchs was set at 3,300, and this number was largely maintained thereafter. Compared to the vast eunuch teams of the Ming dynasty, which numbered in the tens of thousands, the Qing dynasty maintained a much smaller eunuch workforce, reflecting the government's effective restriction of their power. Thus, the management of eunuchs in the Qing dynasty was extremely strict. There were numerous regulations to control their behavior, and a complete system of punishments in place. In addition to the aforementioned rules, the Naiwafu also formulated more than 50 specific laws to regulate the daily behavior of eunuchs. For example, if a eunuch was found hoarding firearms or gunpowder in the palace, they would be immediately executed. If a eunuch entered the palace with a knife, pretended to be mad, or engaged in drunken disturbances, they would be imprisoned and await execution. If a eunuch attempted suicide or self-harm, even if saved, they would be heavily punished. Other violations such as listening to plays, drinking alcohol, or engaging in verbal or physical disputes would also result in severe punishment. For example, eunuchs caught listening to plays or drinking would receive 100 lashes and a month in confinement, while those involved in fights would be given 60 lashes. Minor infractions like requesting leave without permission or arriving late could result in 20 to 30 lashes. These harsh rules made life very difficult for the eunuchs. They were not allowed to speak, walk, or bow casually, and even the slightest carelessness could lead to a beating or more severe punishment. If a eunuch could not bear the oppression and attempted to escape or harm themselves, they would face even harsher penalties, such as being sent to work as laborers in remote areas or even execution. In the Qing dynasty, eunuchs not only lacked political power, but their very existence was also under constant scrutiny and severe punishment. It is worth noting that high-ranking eunuchs were not exempt from these harsh conditions. Many powerful eunuchs lived in constant fear of making a mistake that could cost them their lives. An example from the Tongzhi period is the case of the powerful eunuch Ndihai. Although he was deeply trusted by Empress Dowager Cixi, he was still bound by the same laws. In 1869, Undihai went on an imperial mission to procure a dragon robe for Emperor Tongzhi but was arrested by Ding Baozhen, the governor of Shandong, on the way. Since eunuchs were not allowed to leave the palace without the emperor's direct orders, Undihai was sentenced to death. Even Empress Dowager Cixi was unable to intervene, and she had to accept this cruel reality. Another famous eunuch, Li Lianying, enjoyed great favor with Empress Dowager Cixi and even received a special second-rank hat with a topknot, but he was very aware of the dangers of his high position. He lived a very low-key and cautious life. For example, when accompanying Prince Chun to inspect the Beiyang fleet, he deliberately removed his special hat and changed into plain clothes to avoid drawing attention. Li Lianying understood that while eunuchs might appear to hold significant power, their position was always surrounded by suspicion and distrust. These examples illustrate that no matter how high the rank or how great the power of a eunuch, they were still subject to strict regulations and scrutiny. The Qing eunuch system created a much stricter system of checks and balances compared to other dynasties, especially in preventing eunuchs from interfering in politics. It established a well-organized and complete management system for eunuchs. Some historians have commented that, overall, the Qing dynasty's eunuch system successfully prevented eunuchs from meddling in state affairs through stringent laws, regulations, and the management of the Naiwafu. This ensured the absolute control of the imperial power and kept eunuchs confined to their role as palace servants, unable to challenge the emperor's authority. Therefore, from the perspective of preventing eunuchs from interfering in politics and ensuring their service to the imperial family, the Qing dynasty's eunuch system was undoubtedly the most successful. This is the History and Culture channel. Liking and subscribing are the greatest help and support to us. Thank you everyone and see you in the next time.